Welcome back for another EVE Online video. Got the Rorqual out here doing some ice mining, solo, of course, with ice excavators. Just seeing how, every so often, just gotta kind of take this thing out here and, see how much ice we can gather up and how quick. But I figure in this episode, we'll just kind of chill, kind of talk about, some different things as far as like nullsec and some isk making things and kind of just how I kind of break up the monotony and through different activities and mining still being one of them. Haven't really been doing a whole lot of mining lately, but since I've like decided to like kind of prune everything down to basically just a main and just a main alt. My main alt essentially acts as just like an emergency sino when I'm doing things like this, but this is a lot more chill than actually like coming out here and dragging for me with a Hulk, because with that I'd have to have just extra ships. I try to run with as little ships as possible. This allows me to just, if I need to move areas or something, I can just pick up everything and, move out pretty quickly, which is why I run the Golem for almost everything I do in ratting. The Tengu I have is just kind of like a utility piece because the Tengu is, able to, it can travel really well. It can do things like ports and some of the lower rat stuff. If there's a day where I just don't really feel a lot like bastioning and I'm ready to just feeling kind of lazy on the sense of where if I need to get off grid, I don't have to worry about timing anything. Then those are the days that the Tengu is nice. But really, income has been really good as far as data and relics over the past week or so. We're doing really well this month, and which is really exciting. As far as combat sites go, I try to only do like 6 of 10s, 7 of 10s, and 8 of 10s. Those are kind of the sweet spot for me. 7 of 10s are probably by far my favorite because there's more value. There's 5 pockets, but there's more value there. Pith penal complexes, those 8 of 10s, they're fine. That box at the end is worth 80, but all the ISK you get from the kills is a little bit more than the 7 of 10 and the 6 of 10. 6 of 10 and also as far as loot is kind of like middle of the road, right? It's gonna be obviously better than what you get off of a commander in like an unrated combat site, but really what I like seeing is the operations complex at 7 of 10. Those I've pulled a lot of loot out of, and you can get really lucky. Sometimes I've pulled a Gist X extra large shield booster out of there before, which I think retails over a billion now. That was a really good combat site whenever I did that. That was a little bit earlier this year, but really, as far as like mining goes, and for this, like, I don't try to do anything crazy. My goal for the Rorqual solo mining is usually just to come out here, kill one of these rocks, which is usually 200 or 300 units, and then bounce. Right? I don't try to do anything extremely crazy because as little jumping as I do with like the Rhea or the Phoenix or anything like that, doing one ice rock a week is enough to kind of keep me in isotopes, because also I try not to move around things too much, right? Which means that like all of my export out of null ends up I try to make it as valuable as possible with as little cubic meters as I can. So I try to line those. I try to have mostly like overseer packages and dead space modules, and then I'll mine Mercoxis and refine it into Morphite. Morphite's really good, just to kind of like line a jump freighter load. Like for instance, if I was gonna take a bunch of like fuel blocks back to high sec, you wouldn't just fill up a RIA and and jump it back, right? Because the value of the fuel blocks isn't necessarily worth the fuel. So what I'll end up doing is I'll end up just throwing like a couple billion worth of Morphite in with those blocks, and then really with a couple billion worth of the Morphite, it doesn't even matter what else you fill the Rhea or the Jump Raider up with. The trip's gonna be worth it, and that's kind of how I look at it in terms of that. And really, that's kind of what I use Mercoxis for, is just kind of like a silver lining and everything like that. So as you can see here, we just killed this rock. So I'm gonna I'm gonna be taking these guys back into the Rourke, and we've got about a minute and 16 seconds left. And I'm probably gonna do another rock today, because I haven't done this in a few weeks. And what I'm also going to do is, while I'm still got like a minute, I'm going to turn compression on. Look at that. Great. It would be kind of interesting to actually run this Rourke until we actually fill up on compressed ice, and I can show you guys what kind of that's worth. So that might be the focus of this video. We might just see how much we can fill up. If I kind of let the recording go the whole time, then it's going to be a very, very long video. I mean, we could be out here for an hour or so. So I'll try to break it up and kind of edit it a little bit so it's a little bit easier to consume. So what I'll do is once we get out of siege here and I get kind of over this rock, I usually take breaks in between rocks. Just kind of like move my scout around and kind of see what's going on in the area. But what we'll do is once we come out of siege here, we'll kind of get back up and over this rock and get it mined out as well, and just kind of see what the value of a full Rourke of compressed ice is. Be a nice little challenge for today since we had a really good morning with exploration. See what we can do for mining. In episode 15, we did 12 different data relic sites. And for any explorers that are also watching the series, that was covering like 3 different systems. That's your only limiting factor with exploration. When you're starting off, you can just use a single system. You're extremely limited based on like how many cosmic things you get, because they're not all guaranteed to be data relics, right? They can be combat sites, they can be wormholes, they could be gas sites, any number of things, right? So I try to cover like 3 systems, and that allows me to get a good variety of things that cause I'm really just looking for relic sites in those situations. But like the data site stuff, does come in handy on days where I feel like I want to like do like an abyssal. I might actually bring an abyssal ship out to Null for a few episodes just to use up some of the filaments that I have acquired. I like abyssals. It's just some of the fits that go into those can be a little expensive. That's the only thing. And I try to run with as little ships as possible, just because I'm kind of a minimalist, both in Eve and also just in real life. Just not having to worry about a lot of assets has been kind of like an OCD thing for me. And it's also kind of a challenge, the challenging portion of like how I like to play as well, which is generating as much income as I can with as little assets as possible is kind of where my enjoyment comes through for a lot of things. Now, in terms of anybody who wants to get into like, Rorqual mining, which like what you're saying I'm doing here, keep in mind you need to be really comfortable operating a Rorqual. And also I wouldn't recommend everybody doing this. I have a lot of income over the years I've been playing. I tend to save quite a bit. I turn a lot of my ISK into Plex, and I kind of let that sit, and I'll play market games and stuff like that, and not necessarily day trade, but like I'll go buy a bunch of like I'll buy like 1 bill of a certain commodity, and then I usually write down somewhere how much I pay for that lot, and then periodically I'll just check, and if I can get close to double on the resale, then I'll usually try to do that. But that's like a long term like market gain that I kind of do. I might do some videos over that in the future because it's something I want to get more into as far as just kind of playing that market game. But as far as like being able to afford to even want to do this, I mean, a lot of this is just like the enjoyment I get from like the Rorqual mining with drones. Trumps really the risk for me, because most of the time I can come out here and do 1 rock and not be really accosted by neutrals or anything like that, and it saves me a lot of time. If I was going to drag this, the ice that I've already gotten since being out here would have taken me probably a couple of hours, even with 1 or 2 hulks falling behind. So, and I try to keep my isotope need down pretty low too. So this is not an activity that is, required for my existence, my day-to-day existence. In my corporation, which is just me in it, we don't run structures because we don't want to have that fuel requirement. Because the second you drop a structure or a pause, then you have an hourly consumption that you have to worry about in terms of fuel blocks and things like that. So I just try to like, you know, use alliance structures or things like that, which cuts down on my overall cost. Another thing I thought about getting into more recently was faction warfare, since they made a lot of changes to it, and I can technically enlist myself through the corporation. It's just, I don't know. It might be something that I try, or maybe the alt, but I'm not really sure what I want to do in terms of that. I think before I do anything crazy, like getting into faction warfare, I might just try to like lean more into Abyssal, or even just go dip into like wormhole systems and kind of explore and show more rat sites inside of wormhole space. Which I have a Drake fit that I like to take into wormhole rat sites. And that blue loot that comes out of there is like ratting in the wormhole is like super consistent, and it's something that you can almost predict. I mean, there's the fixed types and amounts of NPCs. The loot they drop is consistent, so the only thing is about actually scanning them down and finding them. Rolling holes being solo can be extremely obnoxious. And when you're rolling for like content and stuff like that, it's a little bit easier with a group. But also, the more people you're running in a wormhole with, the more you have to roll for content because everybody's kind of consuming whatever's available. So there's like a balance, right, for wormholing. I've been wanting to do wormholing for a year or so now, but I'm just kind of like trying to still figure out how I want to approach it. Um, some other things I want to do also in the next few months too is probably some Poshman. Try to go work on my trig standings and things like that, and just kind of go out and show the content that can be done there in trig space, which I find fun and entertaining. So there's a lot of things I still want to do. I know like the the first half of this, I guess, series has been nothing but null. Um, but I'm trying to like my goal is actually kind of branch off into the different areas of the game too. I'd still want to do some like high sec stuff in terms of like security missions, even do some like mining videos or mining episodes for high sec, do some low sec ratting, Poshman, wormhole, and things like that. Um, but I had been on hiatus for a while, so I'm really just kind of getting back into the swing of things. And null is where I have the majority of my experience when it comes to generating income. So I think probably the first thing I'll probably end up doing is probably do some abyssals, and then I think we'll go from abyssals to like Poshman. I might actually like end up grinding a lot of the trig standings um, outside of episodes because I want to get to a point where I can actually do things like docking and get into the like I don't want to just operate in the border systems. I want to be able to get into like the home systems and stuff like that, and like that's all just tied to your standings as far as like having a lot of access to that kind of stuff. So a lot of experimenting for that. I mean, I've done mining and Poshman for like Spud main and things like that, but that's about the extent of it. So I'm excited to see kind of like you know where I can find content at. I think one of the things that I probably had the least experience with is low sec. Um, I mean, I've done some like mining, gas mining, and just normal anom mining and some ratting in low sec. But I would actually really love to actually just kind of like live in low sec because it's one of the aspects of the game that I have probably the littlest time doing. But that obviously that comes with its own challenges as well. I think goals in Eve is really important too. And I struggled a lot whenever I first started playing, knowing because I was coming from like other MMOs and other types of RPG games where like there was a very clear goal and a clear progression. And for Eve, I was very unsure what like my overall long term goal was. I pretty much figured it out at this point, right? Like I want to accumulate as much wealth as possible in terms of like plex, and also just accumulate as many skill points as possible. Now, when I first started playing, I got to my first 50 mil skill points pretty quick because I was using like large skill injectors and things like that. But really, the cheapest way to get skill points is by just training them naturally with your Omega and doing that with like +5 attribute implants, which is what I normally run all the time on my alt and on my main. Once you get past 50 mil skill points, injectors are just really, really bad. And right now I'm at like 90, 97 million, I think. And at that point, like, I mean, now they cost probably like close to a bill each. And at 97 million skill points, that's 900 something million ISK for essentially 2 days off training, which is not worth it, right? Back then, when I used to buy them when I was below 50 mil, they were a lot cheaper before the increase in Plex price and Omega. I mean, large kill injectors, I think at one point were like 615 million. So it was, I mean, it made sense for at the time. But I think back on like all the ISK I spent on those skill injectors and stuff like that, I could have just kind of banked that, and I would have been even better off than than I was with spending all of it. So my advice is like if your goal is the same as mine and you just want to get a lot of skill points and you want to generate a lot of net worth in terms of like your assets and your plex and your ISK, then just try to stay away from large skill injectors if you can. I think it is worth it if you need to get into a ship to do things like to do your normal day to day. Like I would say if you're below 20 million skill points and you want to get into like the golem for ratting and null, 100% you should like try to inject into that because it's a big train, but it's gonna pay off, right? Or if you're trying to get into like crane to do like exporting and stuff like that, or if you're trying to get into Tingu to have a little bit more flexibility, or like even like scanning. If you want to get into like, I'd probably say like for people who are starting out, the best use early on when you're like below 20 million skill points is siege over here real quick. Like if I had to do it all over again, I would have started playing Eve, and I would have just like started putting my eyes on exploration. I would have just set the beam for covert ops, buzzard, get all the scanning skills, and like just get my ass out to like nullsec and start generating income through relics, and then all that income I would use to then buy injectors and things like that in order to get up to where I have a maxed out Torp Golem. And then once I got those two ships, max scanning and covert ops and max Golem, then I would have just kind of called it cold turkey on skill injectors. And actually, I probably wouldn't even do a buzzard because if I did an Astro and did the max scanning, the Astro will actually go into the frigate escape bay for the Golem. So if you're out there doing security missions and stuff like that, you could technically bring your scan ship with you, dock at an NBC station, take out your Astro, do all the scanning, find out what's out there, and take your Golem. And then when you're ready to move to another system and do that same thing, you get into your Golem, you put your Astro in the frigate escape bay, and you carry on. That comes in handy too if you're only like one character in nullsec, because otherwise you're like flying to different systems, scanning everything, bookmarking everything. If you find something you want to run, then you got to go all the way back to wherever your ratting ship is, grab it, and then come all the way back. So logistics. I'm constantly thinking of logistics in terms of like exporting things, exporting goods, or just like how much time I spend actually traveling and moving, assets, or like moving ships around just to do wealth generation activities like ratting or data relics. So my Sino alt is actually in the process of training into the buzzard fit that I use, just so that I can kind of plant her in another system for eyes. But then if a cosmic signature kind of pops up over there, then she can scan it and bookmark it because I have them all in the same access list for my own bookmark folder. So she can technically create the bookmarks, and then when my main, who's in the golem, is ready, all they have to do is just go to that system, warp to, and do the thing. So yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of stuff I haven't talked about in terms of like how I do bookmarks and like access list and all that stuff. I'll probably do a video going over setting up like your own access list in terms of sharing bookmarks between alts, which is super helpful because it allows me to like bookmark once, but like all of my characters have access to it. I know earlier in the video I said I was gonna like fill up this whole Rorqual with compressed ice, but I'm a little bored with it already. We've already done, we're on like the 6th rock or so, which is perfectly enough for me for a while. We're sitting at about a little over 200 mil worth of ice right now, which is pretty decent. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. We've had a pretty good day so far as exploration and then the mining and stuff like that. So thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video, and probably try to do some more combat sites here in the next few days and try to get some modules and stuff like that that we can export to try to bring up our value a little bit more on the item side. Anyway, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.